Paris, a verdict in one of the most closely watched war crimes cases in recent history, the genocide trial of Ratko Mladic, the former Bosnian Serb general held responsible for the massacre of some 8,000 Muslim men and boys at Srebrenica in 1995, is expected this month, after a judge rejected defense lawyers' pleas to postpone the judgment. The decision by the United Nations War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague came after defense lawyers for Mr. Mladic, 75, contended that he was no longer mentally and physically competent to appear in court. His is the last high-profile case before the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Lawyers have demanded that Serbian doctors review Mr. Mladic's condition, insisting that court-appointed physicians have been playing down their client's dire state and neglected to carry out important tests for heart disease and brain damage. The lawyers also say they were denied the full release of all of his medical records. Dan Mladic, an American lawyer who is the co-counsel on the Mladic team, said his client's condition, already weakened by 2 strokes by the time he was arrested in 2011, has worsened since his trial ended last December. Court-appointed doctors as well as teams of Russian and Serbian specialists who saw him in 2015 have said that Mr. Mladic risked another stroke or a heart attack. He is sleeping much of the day and needs assistance with food, hygiene and dressing, said Mr. Mladic, adding that his client's right side is partly paralyzed and brain scans show considerable damage from several mini-strokes. When I see him, he often slurs his speech. He repeats himself. He has hearing problems and great difficulty remembering things. He cuts short visits so he can go to sleep. Quote, but on Friday, the presiding judge in the tribunal nonetheless ordered that the verdict be issued on November 22 as planned. The prison doctors and independent experts monitoring Mr. Mladic have described his condition as stable. The judge wrote, this year, the court had also turned down Mr. Mladic's request to be treated in Russia or Serbia, because it said there was a risk he would not return to The Hague. Mr. Mladic said he would continue to challenge the judgment. It was the latest in a flurry of decisions and motions that have seized the tribunal as it prepares to close one of the most important cases in its history before wrapping up its work at the end of this year. Anxious court officials see the alarm over Mr. Mladic's health as a ploy by the defense to avoid an almost certain guilty verdict, an event that would have dramatic consequences for the court and for the uncounted numbers of people who lost relatives, friends and homes in the military offensives that he led. There is nothing going on that is alarming right now. There is no peak of danger. Quote, Serge Brammertz, the tribunal chief prosecutor, said in a confident tone last week. During his 4-year trial, the prosecution portrayed Mr. Mladic, who led the Bosnian Serb army during the 1992–1995 war, as a merciless and fanatical commander, responsible for the destruction of Sarajevo and the massacre of thousands of captured Bosniak boys and men at Srebrenica. They have asked for a life sentence. Looming over the proceedings is the memory of the case of Slobodan Milosevic, the Serbian president, who died in his prison cell of a heart attack in 2006, close to the end of his lengthy trial. After his death, there was much sparring between his supporters in Serbia and the tribunal over whether his death was avoidable. Mr. Milosevic himself had tried to go to Moscow for treatment for a heart condition, and court officials suspected to abscond from The Hague. A final internal review concluded that he had been given proper care, but had also ignored doctors' orders, often refusing to take blood pressure pills or taking unapproved medicines and alcohol brought by visitors. He had also refused to be hospitalized in the Netherlands for cardiac tests. But Mr. Mladic has not resisted treatment and even thanked his caretakers a few years ago for saving his life. After arriving in The Hague in 2011, as he put it, with one foot in the grave. Quote, "Yet tension between Mr. Mladic's caretakers and his lawyers have grown this year after he was rushed to a hospital for an undisclosed crisis in March. Asked what Russian or Serbian doctors could do for Mr. Mladic that Dutch doctors could not. Mr. Mladic said suspicions grew when the defense could not obtain Mr. Mladic's full records, test results or medical imagery to evaluate his condition. I cannot think of a benign reason why we can't get all the documents," he said. Dr. Paulus Falk, the chief medical officer at the prison, has repeatedly said that Mr. Mladic's ailments were treated in keeping with Dutch protocols. For now, Mr. Mladic appears largely shielded from outsiders. Except for his family, he is withdrawn and rarely mingles with other detainees. He has asked to see a Russian Orthodox priest, Mr. Mladic said, but has not yet been offered a meeting.